Squid Game has returned for its final season, and it's safe to say that following the conclusion of the show, this was arguably the most emotional ending that we could have been given. With the games being what made the show so iconic, and the use of children's games that many of us played when we were younger at a time where there was no consequence, now being paired with the most fiercest consequence of them all, which is death. The show took what's usually so simple and made it so much more difficult. So with that, I want to discuss every new game in Season 3 of the show and rank them from worst to best. So let's get into it. Here is Squid Game Season 3, every new game explained. Game 1, Hide and Seek. The first game that featured in Season 3 was a game that many of us have played over the years, Hide and Seek. However, with it being in Squid Game, there was a massive twist involved. The players would walk over to this large bowl which had blue and red balls inside of them. They'd pick one and then that would dictate which bib they'd wear and which side they'd ultimately end up on. If a player ended up on the blue team, it meant that you were part of the people that were hiding and you had to do your best to avoid being spotted. If you were on the red team, it meant that you were the seekers, and if a member of the red team found a blue player, then they'd need to kill them. If the Blues made it to the end of the 30-minute timer and they hadn't been found, then they'd be through to the next game. However, if a Red didn't manage to kill somebody in that time frame, then they'd end up being eliminated themselves by a soldier. All they needed was one kill to go through. This was all taking place inside of a maze-type structure with lots of twists and turns, which made it difficult for players to navigate and to remember where they were and where they spotted others. To give the Reds the upper hand, the soldiers gave every member of the red team a blade, so that if they were to come face to face with a blue player, then there was an easy way of killing them rather than just using their hands. However, in order to level the playing field slightly and give the Blues more hiding spots, each blue player was given a key which allowed them to open doors that were in front of them. A key would either be in the shape of a circle, a square, or a triangle, and it would need to fit into the correct hole in order for it to allow the door to open. Once the door was unlocked, there was no locking it on the other side, so whilst it opened up the maze and made it bigger, it didn't prevent the Reds from walking through. The blue players were also teased with the idea of there being this door which allowed them to leave the game and find safe haven. This was the exit, but that was buried deep within the maze. What we saw with the exit was that in order to get out, there'd need to be one of each kind of key, which showed that in a game where most people were only looking out for themselves and where selfishness and greed was at the heart of them, working together was the only way that you'd truly find that safe haven and be immune from the Reds being able to come after you. So the game did have a powerful message at its core. This game also contained one of the most powerful moments in the entirety of the season, which was Hyunju's death, which came at the hands of Myungji. This was a great game, and one that was filled with tension, and it showed the true horrors and lengths that people would go to. Because it put the people against the people in a personal way, and it showed how easy and willing they were to kill, as long as it meant that they were okay. Game 2, Jump Rope. Like Hide and Seek, Jump Rope is a game that many of us most likely also played when we were younger. During this game, we saw that the players were on one side of a bridge that was designed to be a railway bridge, and the purpose of the game was that they had to get to the other side. On one side of the bridge, there was Yonghee, the doll from Red Light Green Light, and on the other side, there was this new doll, which was Cholsu. Rather than the players being shot and needing to freeze like in Red Light Green Light, instead, both dolls were holding either side of a rope, and the players had to get across the bridge within the 20-minute timer whilst jumping over the rope that was swinging over them. There was no set order in which the players had to complete the game, but the further back in the line you were, the more of a disadvantage a player would be at, because they'd have less time to get through. Plus, there was also a reluctance from some of the players in front as they didn't want to move forward, which would mean that a player would just end up standing there on the spot needing to jump because others were just frozen. So doing what Gi-hun did and going across first was probably the best way to do it. As well as needing to jump over the rope, there was also a break in the bridge, which meant that players needed to jump over the rope and over the gap in order to not fall the many feet and end up perishing. Players would be caught out and die by either being hit by the rope and falling to the ground, or even being pushed off by other players. Again, showing the selfish nature that many of them had, because some of them were doing it because it meant that they got a larger share of the prize money. This was a game that also shone a light on the bad side of humanity, and it was home to one of the most powerful and emotional moments in the entirety of the series, Junhee's death. Gi-hun always planned on going back for her, but with the time running out and due to her fractured ankle, it meant that she couldn't make it across on her own, and she knew that Gi-hun wouldn't make it back. So if he didn't, it ultimately meant that her baby wouldn't stand a chance of surviving, and that was the thing that mattered most to her. So, in the end, rather than being killed by one of the soldiers, she took matters into her own hands and stepped off of the ledge, which meant that she died when she hit the ground. This was such an emotional moment, and I'd say that the jump rope game was a great creative choice to include in this season. Game 3, Squid Game. With this being the final season, it always kind of felt like Squid Game had to be the final game that closed it out, so having this new variation of it was a nice touch. Within this game, there were 3 platforms, square, triangle, and circle, and whilst the players were on each platform, at least one player would need to be killed in order for them to progress to the next one. More could be killed if they decided to do so, but with player 100 and his posse coming to the realization that they were going to kill Minsu, Gi-hun, and the baby, it meant that one was enough for each. Because once 3 people were killed, everybody that remained on the circle platform at the end would get their share of the prize money. The round would only begin in this game once the button on the floor was pressed and it turned from red to green. This would activate the timer, and once the 15-minute countdown started, it then meant that the kill counted towards it. If it happened before the timer, then it didn't count, which is what we saw with Myungji's death on the final platform. If the players failed to kill a singular person and throw them off the edge, it meant that all of the players would end up dying and they'd lose the game completely. What this game showed us was both the evil in humanity and also the good at the same time. For example, we saw number 100's posse team up and be prepared to do the most evil thing of all and make the baby be one of the 3. But at the same time, we also saw them all end up turning on each other and showing that they couldn't even be loyal to one another because greed was what kept getting in the way. The most evil thing that we saw though was that Myungji was willing to kill his own child so that he could be set to gain all of the prize money, showing the real bad side of humankind. But then at the same time we saw that not all humans were bad with Gi-hun, as he actually ended up sacrificing himself for the baby because he stuck to his promise of making sure that the baby was safe for Junhee. The baby had committed no sin and was the purest form of life, so Gi-hun felt like the baby deserved a chance in this world. A world that he was trying to make a difference in, but realized that he simply couldn't. It was a fantastic game that was filled with the most powerful moment in the show, which was Gi-hun's death. Those were the 3 games that we got in the new season of the show. There weren't even that many mini-games that were present, but I thought the 3 that we got were really strong. In terms of ranking them, I'd probably say that my favourite was Squid Game because of the tension and the emotion. Then I'd say the jump rope game because that was just a fun one to watch and it looked rather difficult. But it also had the strong moment of Junhee's death. And then finally, in last place, I'd have hide and seek. That was probably the most difficult game for a player, and it was the most brutal one for them all. But for me, I'd just say it was my least favourite. Oh, don't let me forget, we also had Gi right at the end with the new recruiter in the United States. So I suppose, technically, there were 4 games. So, there you have it, Squid Game Season 3, every new game explained. If you want to see a full breakdown of Squid Game Season 3 with the ending explained, then check the video below. I've also put the playlist down there for Season 2 as well. What was your favourite game in Season 3? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.